So most people believe, and I didn't know this until recently, but most people believe that what Sharia is just what is on the books in the four major schools of thought within Islam, right? But Sharia is also the methodology behind how the decisions on the books come to be, both back then and today, right? So if you apply the same methodology of interpreting the Sharia to a given situation today, the ruling might be different in its nuances and advice compared to what is on the books 1400 years ago. Very fascinating, very fascinating. And I was so grateful that this gentleman made these big long posts about this because a lot of people do shoot from the hips. A lot of people do shoot from the hips. They shoot from the hip, single. They claim that they know what they're talking about, and in most cases, they don't. And what really gets me, what really bothers me the most about people who say, oh, this and this is the only way to do it in Islam, the thing that gets me the most about that is that I know before I even accepted Islam, there are four major schools of thought. There are differences of opinions on certain things, not all things, but certain things. The nuances underneath those differences are still considered correct, whether anybody wants to accept them or not, right? Which means, like Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that the differences in those rulings, the differences among the scholars are a mercy unto the believers, right? And I'm heavily paraphrasing that. And so that's really good. But what gets me about this is that people will say, oh, this says this, and so it's the only way you have to believe it. And if you don't do it this way, you're a bad Muslim or you're not even a Muslim at all. It's not true. Now, to be fair, you're going to find that same behavior in pretty much every religion, especially with religions that have denominations. I am really grateful that this gentleman pushed forth this and said, hey, you shouldn't be shooting from the hip. You're not interpreting it correctly. By the way, these scholars have spent decades, like doctors, they've spent decades learning this stuff. And more importantly, it's about the methodology of how the decisions come to be and how that's going to impact the modern day life. And when you understand this, when you really internalize what I just said, and you really think about it, some of the things you've seen on the internet floating around compared to what you're knowing and what you're learning and how things are today, then you start understanding not only how Islam does apply to all time and everywhere, but you also see how at its core, there's common sense, there's balanced fairness, and that in its core, it does uphold all the good things that the Quran talks about. Straight up it does. But you're not going to hear that perspective from trolls or people who are just frothing at the mouth, especially behind anonymous accounts. Or I shouldn't say anonymous accounts because a lot of the sisters are remaining anonymous because they want to protect themselves to a greater degree than some of us who are comfortable sharing our face and name on the internet right now. I get that. What I mean by anonymous is, the throwaway accounts. They're throwaway accounts, and they're just trolls. Like, they're brand new accounts. They've got all sorts of random numbers after their username. They don't even care. They're just there to be a jerk, right? So anyway, that's why I say that. That was a long-winded explanation about that's why I really did enjoy those particular posts. Let's move on to the next one and see what I've got here.